And our other top story, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's sudden decision to resign. The three-term Democrat will step down in 2 weeks following mounting pressure to quit after a bombshell report detailed sexual harassment allegations from 11 women. He denies the claims but says that he will leave office because it's what's best for New York. The choice also comes before legislators launch impeachment proceedings on multiple cases of alleged wrongdoing. So, for more on what comes next, I am joined by CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Ed. You gave us such good insight yesterday after this bombshell announcement. So, Governor Cuomo, though, in his announcement, continued to deny any wrongdoing, continued to say that this was basically a political attack on him. So then the question is, why resign now?
Because he was just going to be completely unable to stop the state legislature from removing him. At this point, a majority of the Democratic-controlled state assembly and a majority of the New York State Democratic-controlled Senate, all Democrats plus Republicans, appeared ready to not only impeach him but remove him from office. A process that, as he pointed out in his statement yesterday, would have taken at least several more weeks, if not months, if it played out by the book, and would have cost the state a lot in not only money, but time wasted, he believed, at a time when the pandemic is raging and an economic recovery is tenuous in a state that needs to have a good one. So he, took a step that many thought was shocking, both because he's known to fight these kinds of things and had never really been known before to put party or his state ahead of his own political ambitions. But if you read through this and think ahead a few plays, what he may be realizing is by removing himself now, avoiding impeachment, if the assembly decides not to proceed, he may be reserving the opportunity to rejoin the political fray one day. And we're not going to know whether the assembly wants to proceed with impeachment or not until Monday. But if you've got a governor removing yourself, you may think, well, the public will say, why continue with this if he's already out of the way?
And so the Lieutenant Governor, Kathy Hochul, will be replacing him. That'll make her the first female governor of New York State. What can you tell me about her? She's got 2 weeks to get ready for the job. Give us some info.
Going to be a busy 2 weeks for somebody who has spent most of her 6 years as a lieutenant governor just traveling the state, touting the Cuomo administration's work. Not somebody who's been involved in tricky budget negotiations, difficult decisions that have to be made by a governor, wasn't ever really in the loop on response to the pandemic, economic recovery that's underway in the state, or other tricky budgetary matters that always consume the state capitol for the first 4 months of a year. She is the 62-year-old from Western New York. By my check, the last person to serve as governor of New York who wasn't from New York City was a guy named Nathan Miller, who served for 2 years, exactly 100 years ago. So it's been a while since somebody north of Yonkers has served as governor, and it's going to be a big deal to a lot of people from across the state to see somebody who's not a New Yorker in terms of the city, but a New York State resident. And I say this as an upstate New Yorker myself. New Yorkers are people who live all across that state, not just in the 212. And, that will potentially add to her, political standing. Somebody who was not involved in decisions made, clearly would not have necessarily known much about his alleged behavior, but now can sort of wipe the slate clean, present herself as a historic governor, as the first woman, but also someone who brings a fresh perspective. And she's got to start thinking right away about whether she wants to run for her own term starting in 2023. She'd be on the ballot next year. Not only the first woman, not only the first Western New Yorker in more than 100 or in about 100 years, but also now New York for the first time has 3 of its top 4 constitutional officers as women. The other one is a black man, the Speaker of the Assembly. That's a first for New York as well.
I want to ask you a question. It's kind of a bit of a conversation that has bubbled up over this. Here you have, a governor that's kind of part of a political dynasty who no one thought would be going anywhere. Certainly, even in his own resignation announcement, he seemed like he was digging in for a fight. And it's not like this is the first scandal or criticism that Governor Cuomo has faced, and he's weathered many a storm. Do you think that maybe watching this fall of Governor Cuomo could have a ripple effect throughout the Democratic Party, whether or not there are other, key political figures who may also have weathered some challenging storms. But now, people are realizing, hey, even politicians who look like they will be there forever may find themselves, walking out the door.
Well, it's a reminder that in American politics, you can be up one minute and very much down the next. But you also potentially could find a way to come back. Americans and New Yorkers certainly like a comeback story. And so again, I think the fact that he removes himself from this now to face legal challenges, because he will still face those, potentially criminal, probably civil. If he can get out of the way of that in the next few years, what's to say that the winds won't blow back in his favor at some point? It's happened before to members of both parties in various states across the country. The other thing to keep in mind, while the sexual misconduct allegations were what was driving the impeachment push, it was the culmination of about 10 years of frustration that legislators had with him over a host of issues. Everything from the multi-million-dollar memoir deal he signed last year during the pandemic and questions about whether he'd use state resources, concerns about the state potentially covering up data about the deaths of people in nursing homes from COVID-19 and his decision to send COVID-19 patients back to those nursing homes. Concerns about pay-for-play scandals across the state involving State University and other projects, some of his aides who had gone to prison, concerns about the construction or the reconstruction of a major bridge there north of New York City, now known as the Mario Cuomo Bridge, named for his father, and his decision years ago to disband a public integrity commission that had started looking into his own government. So you add all of that up, and you throw sexual misconduct on top of it, which of course is such a radioactive and urgent concern for people, and in politics now, at least in Democratic Party politics, unacceptable for leaders, and it was just the perfect toxic brew to get rid of them. It also speaks, again, to another, perhaps now the biggest example, that among Democratic Party leaders, and I say leaders because we don't know really we won't know how New York voters felt about this until we see some kind of a poll in the next few weeks, or we see the results of next year's elections. But among Democratic Party leadership, allegations of sexual misconduct are now considered verboten, and you lose your job over it. And the only one who's weathered that in recent years, arguably, although the allegations were far different and less severe and less consistent, was Joe Biden when he was a candidate, who apologized for it, changed his behavior, and has embraced the Me Too movement and reminded people that he'd worked on domestic violence and sexual harassment issues for years. But beyond him, Al Franken had these issues, Andrew Cuomo now, there have been others who've been pushed out, and Democrats can turn and say, look, we hold our leaders accountable for this kind of behavior. Republicans don't necessarily, because they didn't with former President Trump, and that will, continue to be a distinguishing characteristic between the two parties going into elections next year.
Yeah. Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much.
Take care.